So I think that it's easier to report higher levels of happiness when you perceive it to be your only option is living in the home and having children and raising them. Yeah. So, but what do you have to say to that? Because
yeah, so interestingly,
because it goes to your like underreported things, like you were talking about earlier.
Well, first of all, when you give anecdotal evidence, like, oh, my mom and mom's friends.
Oh, I can give you an actual study if you want.
May have, and I can refute it. I promise. But here's the thing: when you give anecdotal evidence and you say, well, my mom's friends, this and that, wish that they could have gone to school. There's also anecdotal evidence, and an awful lot of it, and you can find it on YouTube right now, of tons of women saying they wish that they had not gone and gotten a career and wish that they would have instead deferred those childbearing years in order to have a family, because they see the happiness levels of their friends, colleagues, coworkers, things like this. That anecdotally is also just as true. But to even go on to the ignorance is bliss, I could say this and make this case about literally anything. I could say, well, I would love heroin, right? I've never taken it, but ignorance is bliss, right? Oh, I could say ignorance is bliss about literally anything, any drug,
well, that's not the only
hang on, any
though.
risky, I didn't cut you off, any risky behavior, any of this. I could say that about anything. What you're doing is saying, these women are happy. There must be some bad reason for that.
Oh no, some women are happy.
No, you're saying,
I agree.
These women are happy and there must be a bad reason for that, and the bad, because they're doing traditional, because they're doing traditional gender roles. So that must be bad. So we can explain that away by saying, if they had all these negative experiences, that those women who have those negative experiences actually report a higher unhappiness level, those women would actually be happier. That's absurd logic, by the way.
Okay, sure. Well, again, I agreed with you on quite a few things there, but I would also like to say that, like I said at the beginning in my opening statement, the home being the most dangerous place for women, like there are women who are in abusive marriages, and so they have to convince themselves that they are happy because their husband is beating them or like assaulting them or harming their children. And when you're in that sort of situation, it's very difficult to be able to walk away from it, and oftentimes because you're isolated. And so, yeah, because the home is the most dangerous place for women, and 6 women are killed every hour in the home around the world. Those are very difficult realities that a lot of people don't want to grasp. And I'm not saying that every woman doesn't, isn't happy in the home. I think there are plenty of happy moms. I mean, my mom has worked and raised our children, her children, and my sisters and I, and like helped my dad out with like work. But yeah, for the most part, was a stay-at-home mom, and I think she really enjoyed it. But for me, at this point in my life, that's not something that I would like. And it's not to say that it's a bad thing, but I think that some people are convincing themselves that they're happy when in reality it's a very difficult situation.
I'm going to have to go back to the NIS, where I point out to you that, as you keep saying, that the most dangerous situation for women is in the home.
Well, that's according to the UN around the world, though, not just here.
Okay, but inside of the United States, at least, and inside of the Western nations, this is a commonality that they all share. It's not usually from the husband. It's usually from boyfriends of single women or single moms, or as far as, for instance, cohabitation. Cohabitation leads to some of the worst outcomes for women when they're not married, and men. It leads to terrible outcomes for both. This idea that you have that when you say this, it's very loaded. It gives the impression that husbands are at home abusing their wives, and the opposite is actually true. The truth is that when women get divorced and they end up in these occupied relationships, that's when they end up with the most amount of abuse, not from their husbands.
Well, I think it's, how we were talking about earlier about like confounding factors and other things that might, the classification of things might change the results of studies. For this one, I'm looking at it, and it says facts and statistics on, domestic violence DV, and it's mainly including intimate partner. So it's not talking about husband or boyfriend.
That's why we separate them, right? So we would separate those two categories to see who's the more abusive.
Do you have a statistic?
Yes, I just gave it to you twice from the NIS.
But I know, but like I'm looking at it, and again, like I'm having.
Show me the numbers from the NIS that you're looking at. I actually don't believe you.
Oh, I'm not looking at the NIS right now. I was looking at it earlier, could not find the number you were talking about.
Yeah, but you looked at it for 1 minute.
No, I didn't.
You did. I literally pulled it direct from the NIS itself.
When there is a minor in the home and there is abuse, they look at both parents. And in that case, they are finding, according to this, the Domestic Violence Center data for Mankind Initiative, I'm finding...
The Mankind Initiative?
Yeah, here,
I'll send it to you. The cult, the Mankind Initiative?
I have no idea what you're talking. I mean, this is it's a statistic, it's like a study that's produced.
Yeah,
I could go to the University of Pennsylvania's one if you want.
Yeah, do that, because the Mankind Initiative, as far as I know, is a Western cult which exists as a demasculating agency, just so you know.
Okay. Well, so it's saying analyzing 31,000. This is Penn today. So this does go to your point. It is just slightly above the spouse rate for abusive boyfriends. But again,
and those go reported much more, right? The marriage rates go reported much more than than these rates where you're living outside of the home with another man.
Right. So
because that's the more common living arrangement. Therefore, I am correct. It is true that the most dangerous situations co-occupancy, not marriage.
I mean, there's different. I think it's difficult. You deal a lot in absolutes, and as a teacher, that's something that we are told not to do to facilitate like open communication. Is because you typically say, "Well, this is true. This is true. That means I am truth. I am correct in saying this thing." But again, statistics are changing all the time. So actually, you're contradicting yourself because at the beginning you were like,
"What I'm saying is
things
change. I can negate these with logic by simply pointing this out."
I mean, you can negate anything when you talk to yourself like you do, because you're not really listening to the words that are coming out of my mouth.
I'm listening do you want me to steelman your position? You just said to me that everything when it comes to statistics is fluid. I would tend to agree with that based on oncoming data which is coming in. However, we still have to apply logic and inductive reasoning even when we're dealing with data sets, especially.
I didn't say we don't. I agree.
So those are unchanging, unconfounding variables, logic and reason. So if we're using those two things, we can easily point to this and say, we know for sure that it's going to be underreported in cohabitation and possibly reported at least better from the marriage standpoint. That's probably true. I don't think anybody would really dispute that.
Yeah, actually, I found a study to your point. Researchers have consistently found higher rates of violence in cohabitating compared to marital relationships. But in those cases, still it is 95% of perpetrators are male. So what do you have to say in terms of that?
Yeah, okay, so here's what happens. What feminism has done, especially with the destruction of the marriage, is it has put women in the most vulnerable position, where now they leave their home with their husband, where the abuse rates are not nearly so high as pretentious feminists pretend they are, so that they can cohabitate with men, with other men who are strangers to them, strangers to their children. It puts their children at risk, and it puts them at actually higher risk than if they had stayed with their husbands in most cases.
Oh, okay.